The airbase shimmered beneath the relentless sun, the heat rising in visible waves that blurred the hard edges of concrete and steel. Engines roared in bursts of sound that rattled the glass of the control tower and made the ground tremble beneath every boot. Polished jets lined the flight line like trophies, their surfaces catching the sunlight and flaring it back at the sky in brilliant flashes. The F-35s and F-22s gleamed as if they had been built solely for display. Every inch of them wiped clean of dust or wear. Crews moved between them with easy confidence, pilots in immaculate flight suits laughing over some shared joke that echoed too loud, as if volume itself could signal rank. At the edge of all this stood Leah. Her uniform was plain. The olive fabric faded at the seams, the boots scuffed where metal and concrete had worn them down. The patch with her name had once been clear and sharp, but now the letters had softened, the thread pale from sun and time. She walked with purpose, head held level, shoulders set in quiet alignment, but no one called to her or waved. The crowds moved around her without noticing, their eyes on each other, or on their own reflections in the bright fuselage of the jets. The smell of jet fuel and hot oil hung heavy in the air, mingling with the tang of sun-baked metal. The tarmac itself seemed to radiate heat like a second sun underfoot, each step rising back into the soles of her boots. She carried a clipboard in one hand, the corners worn soft, the surface etched with pencil marks where she had made her notations. A smudge of graphite darkened the pad of her thumb, unnoticed as she shifted the board to tap a key at a data console tucked against the base of a radar mast. On the screen, a flicker caught her eye, a faint blip at the edge of the range, then another, not aligned with any known flight path or scheduled return. Leah narrowed her gaze, adjusted the filter settings, and watched the signal repeat. Small, sharp, not noise, but not tagged. She checked the time against her notes, then turned from the console and walked toward the group gathered near the command canopy. The pilots were relaxed, gathered in loose formation around a tech cart piled with water bottles and tablets. One leaned against the strut of a gleaming F-35, his helmet dangling from two fingers, as he spoke with the easy confidence of someone used to being heard. Leah stepped up to the edge of the group and cleared her throat, raising the clipboard slightly. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was clear. I'm seeing something on long range. It isn't mapped and it isn't scheduled. Might be worth a second look." For a beat, no one answered. Then one of the pilots turned, his grin sharp, the sun flashing off his mirrored glasses. His name, stenciled across his chest, was too polished to have seen a day of wear. "Thanks. Systems girl. Let the grown-ups handle it." The line came easy to him, practiced, and it drew a burst of laughter from the others. Someone clapped him on the shoulder, another mimed tipping an imaginary hat to Leah in mock respect. Leah stood still, her grip on the clipboard unchanged. She did not argue. She did not drop her gaze. She simply waited a breath longer than the moment required, then turned back toward the console. The pilots returned to their banter, their attention snapping back to their reflections in the bright hulls of their jets. Behind the line, at the far edge of the field, sat the F-16. Its skin was matte with age, the paint dulled, the seams marked with the quiet scars of service. No crew checked its panels. No tech cart sat beside it. The shadow it cast on the tarmac was long and solitary, unbroken by movement or care. Leah passed near it as she crossed toward the outer pad, her eyes lingering for half a second on the angle of its wing, the way the light played across the curve of its canopy. A voice called from behind her. She did not need to look to know the tone. Another pilot, younger, but eager to belong, phone in hand. The click of the camera was almost lost in the noise of a jet engine cycling down, but the sound reached her anyway. The phone angled as he captured the image. Leah framed beside the tired F-16, a figure out of place among the gleam and posture. "Hangar Barbie wants a turn," he said, too loud, sharing the caption with a grin that drew more laughter from those near enough to hear. The image zipped into the private group chat before Leah had taken her next step. She did not stop. The heat rose around her like a tide, the concrete beneath her feet radiating back at the sky. The roar of another engine lifted, masking the last of the laughter as the jets on the main line powered through pre-flight checks. Leah returned to the radar mast, adjusted the filters once more, and noted the blip as it flickered again at the edge of range. She wrote the time in the margin of her notes, pencil steady, the graphite catching the light where it shaded the edge of the paper. The base moved on without her. Orders crackled over radios. Crews rolled carts into position. The shimmer of heat above the runway turned the horizon to a blur. The blacktops stretched away beneath the press of the sun, the edges of the flight line lost in the glare. Leah stood at her post, clipboard balanced against her palm, eyes on the screen that no one else bothered to watch. The blip appeared once more, faint, deliberate. She marked it again. Her thumb darkened further by the soft smear of pencil. No one spoke her name. No one asked what she saw. The laughter had faded, the image already forgotten in the rush of louder moments. But Leah saw. She always saw. And the F-16 waited, silent and ready, its shadow the only one that reached beyond the polished shine of the others. The hangar was a world transformed at night. Gone were the voices that had filled the day, the shouts of orders, the easy laughter of pilots, the roar of engines that had set the air trembling. In their place came silence, broad and deep, broken only by the hum of the cooling systems that kept the heart of the base beating while the world slept. The overhead lights had been dimmed, leaving only the low glow of safety strips along the walls and the soft green of idle monitors. Shadows gathered in the corners, stretching long across the floor where tools had been left stacked and forgotten. Leah walked across the concrete, her boots the only sound in the vast space, each step falling with quiet certainty. The air smelled of old fuel, faint ozone, and the lingering bite of metal warmed by the day's sun, but now cooling in the night's slow embrace. She passed between parked aircraft, their forms hulking and still, and made her way toward the far wall where the lockers stood in an uneven row. The hinges creaked softly as she opened hers, the sound small but sharp in the quiet. Inside, the flight suit hung as it always did. The fabric had softened with age, the color faded from too many suns and too many washes. The patch at the chest bore her name, Leah. The stitching frayed at the edges but intact. She reached out and ran her fingers along it. The feel familiar, grounding. It was not ceremony that guided her hands but memory, a quiet ritual born of nights like this. She lifted the suit down and folded it once over her arm, then reached deeper into the locker to pull out a worn map, folded so many times that its creases had grown soft and white. She carried both to the workbench near the rear of the hangar, where a single lamp cast a circle of light onto the scarred surface. The map opened with a gentle crackle. She smoothed it flat, the paper cool beneath her palms, her eyes tracing the lines she had drawn herself. Flight paths, intercept zones, altitudes marked in pencil that had faded at the edges. She touched one curve, a path through a canyon marked with a thin red line and a small notation in the corner. She remembered the night she had charted it, remembered the reason. The hum of the simpod called to her, a sound beneath the sound, steady and waiting. She crossed the floor, her steps sure, the flight suit draped over one arm. The simpod sat unused for months now, pushed to the side when newer models had arrived. Its seat cracked along one edge, its controls worn smooth where hands had gripped them 1,000 times. Leah set the suit down on the chair beside it, powered the system, and waited as the display flickered to life, casting a soft glow that painted her face in pale blues and greens. She slid into the seat, the feel of it familiar despite its wear, and adjusted the yoke with a gentle hand. The simulator hummed around her, the virtual world forming out of the dark. She loaded the program she had built herself, a scenario no one trained for anymore. One she had refined in hours, stolen from sleep. The black jets appeared on the screen, shapes of shadow and speed, and she met them as she always did, alone. Her mind focused, her breath steady. Her fingers moved with precision, adjusting, correcting, guiding the virtual F-16 through maneuvers that had once earned nods of respect and now passed unseen. The sim responded, the landscape rushing beneath her, the enemy shapes twisting and diving. But she kept to the line she had set, every move drawn from hours of practice and the quiet certainty that came from knowing she could. The hum of the sim filled the space, blending with the faint buzz of the hangar lights and the distant sigh of the night wind against the walls. In the moments between sequences, when the screen paused to reset, Leah's gaze drifted to the photo tucked at the edge of the console. It showed a younger version of herself, face bright with the sharp joy of accomplishment, standing beside an older man with kind eyes and a weathered smile. Behind them, the test jet gleamed in the sun. The day she had earned her wings, the day before the report that had changed everything, the safety flaw she had seen, the flaw they had chosen to ignore, the quiet meeting where she had been thanked and reassigned in the same breath. Her hand touched the photo, just for a second, then returned to the controls. The sim reset, and she flew again. The night deepened, the hangar settling further into stillness. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling a loose sheet of metal somewhere on the far side of the lot. Inside, Leah flew. The cracked seat creaked beneath her, the yoke warm from her grip. She flew the paths she had mapped, met the threats no one else prepared for, and turned them aside with quiet precision. There was no audience, no command watching, no points tallied, only the sky in her mind and the machine beneath her hands. Hours passed unnoticed. The map lay open on the bench, the flight suit folded beside it, the photo resting where she had left it. The hum of the sim softened as she powered it down, the glow of the screen fading back into the dark. Leah stood, the quiet of the hangar filling the space again, the echo of her boots returning as she crossed to the bench. She folded the map along its old lines, smoothed the flight suit once with a flat palm, and slid the photo back into its place, in the locker. The night was nearly gone. The first hint of dawn just a paler shade of black beyond the high windows. Leah closed the locker. The click of the lock, the last sound in the space. She paused for a moment, hand resting on the cool metal, then turned and walked back across the floor. Each step measured, unhurried. The hangar held its breath as she left. The space behind her filled with the quiet proof of work done, of skill kept sharp, not for praise but for the day it would be needed. Outside, the wind carried the promise of morning, and inside, Leah's readiness waited, unseen but complete. The morning broke bright and hard over the airbase, the sun rising without a single cloud to soften its glare. Heat already shimmered above the tarmac, bending the air into liquid ripples that danced between the parked jets. The crews moved with the ease of routine, voices carrying across the concrete in bursts of laughter and casual challenge. Engines cycled up and down in rehearsed sequences, the sound blending into the hum of ground carts and the hiss of fuel lines being uncoupled. It was a morning like any other, heavy with confidence, as if the sky belonged to them by right. Inside the command center, the mood matched the brightness outside. Pilots leaned over consoles, trading comments that blurred between duty and banter. One adjusted his headset, grinning as he mimicked an accent, drawing a laugh from those nearby. Another propped a boot on a chair, tapping at a tablet more for show than study. The screens glowed with status readouts, radar sweeps, and flight schedules, each one another confirmation that all was well and under control. Leah stood apart from the noise. She watched the long-range radar feed as a secondary task, her clipboard resting against the edge of a console, her thumb idly tracing the side where the wood had worn smooth. Her gaze moved between the lines on the screen. Patient, methodical, tuned to patterns no one else bothered to see anymore. The first blip appeared so faint that it could have been dismissed as static. She adjusted the filter, eyes narrowing slightly, and saw it again. Not static, not noise. A shape at the edge of range where no shape should be. A second blip joined the first, then a third. Her pulse picked up, but her hands stayed steady. She leaned closer, fingers dancing over the controls to refine the view. 5 now. 5 shapes moving in formation. Inbound. No transponder. No identification friend or foe signal. No flight plan. No voice over comms. Just shadows on the screen. Growing closer. Leah turned toward the officers gathered at the center of the room. Her voice was clear but quiet. "We have unknowns inbound. No IFF. No call signs. Formation is tight." At first, no one moved. One of the senior pilots glanced up, brows raised more in amusement than concern. Glitch in the system. Seen it before. His tone was easy, confident, dismissive. A second voice joined his, light with humor. Maybe the screen's just bored, like we are. But outside, the hum shifted. A low rumble grew into a roar as the first of the black jets crossed into sight, slicing through the air at a speed that seemed too fast for the eye to follow. Matte black, the shapes gleamed only where the sun caught an edge of their sharp, angular forms. Twin tails, wide wings, a presence like knives in the sky, cutting through the light. The black jets moved with purpose, formation breaking apart as they began their sweep over the base. The shift from ease to panic was immediate. Voices rose, sharp with alarm. Boots struck concrete at a run as crews scrambled to respond. Orders clashed, overlapping as commanders shouted for clarity that did not exist. Engines that had been warming idled were pushed to power. Turbines screaming as jets readied for launch. The smell of burnt fuel filled the air, thick and sharp, mixing with the rising heat from the tarmac. The black jets came low on the first pass, close enough that the shadow of one flickered across the control tower window, darkening the room for a heartbeat. Leah stood still, eyes locked on the radar, tracking their path, noting the precision of their arc. Her breath came steady, her focus unbroken. Around her, the room dissolved into chaos. Radios crackled with orders, with fear. The black jets were inside the perimeter. There was no protocol for this. Pilots sprinted for their aircraft, helmets clutched in tight grips, faces set in grim determination. F-35s and F-22s rolled forward, tires squealing against the concrete, their sleek forms straining toward the sky. But the black jets were already above them, already turning, already faster. The first of the defenders lifted off, engines blazing, only to be outpaced before the climb was complete. The black jets curved and dove, their silence on the radio more chilling than any taunt could have been. From the tower, a voice cracked through the static. Intercept. Intercept. Priority scramble. All assets. But the words came too late. The black jets owned the sky now, their every movement a reminder of how unprepared the base truly was. Leah watched, her hands resting on the railing before the console, her grip firm but calm. The black jets moved like a storm unleashed, their formation now fluid, turning the defenders aside with speed alone. The ground crews froze between actions, caught between orders and instinct, their faces pale in the reflected glare of the morning sun. The radios filled with calls, clipped, urgent, then desperate. Visual lost, I need position. Negative lock, repeat, negative lock. Too fast, I can't. The voices blurred into one another, lost in the rising panic. The black jets made a second pass, lower, closer. The sound of their engines a deep, hollow boom that seemed to press down on the entire field. The polished jets that had gleamed so proudly in the sun now looked fragile, toys abandoned in the face of something greater. Leah's gaze shifted, for just a moment, to the F-16 at the edge of the line. It sat as it always had, matte skin dull against the concrete, shadow long in the morning light. No one moved toward it. No one called for it. But it waited, silent and ready, its presence steady where everything else had shattered. The black jets climbed again, arcs clean and sharp against the blue, turning for another run. The base held its breath. The command center had no answers left. The defenders had been outmatched before they had begun, and Leah stood where she had always stood, the storm breaking around her, unseen but unshaken, watching as the sky darkened beneath the wings of the black jets. The next move would belong to those who could see past fear, past pride, to what the moment truly demanded. But for now, the black jets ruled, and the base could do nothing but watch. The air over the base trembled with the fury of engines pushed beyond their limits and the panic of voices calling for order that no one could give. The black jets circled like shadows given form, their matte bodies cutting clean arcs through the sky as they turned for another pass. On the ground, the polished fighters that had once gleamed with promise now looked small beneath the weight of failure, their pilots forced back, their speed and tech no match for the threat that had come without warning. Leah moved. She stepped from the shelter of the hangar's edge, where she had watched and waited, unseen by those who had never thought to look. The heat of the tarmac pressed against the soles of her boots, the sun throwing her shadow long as she crossed the distance to the F-16 that waited at the far end of the line. Around her, the base swirled with motion, every eye turned to the sky, every thought locked on the black shapes above. No one noticed at first. No one called her name. She reached the aircraft, its surface dull beneath the morning sun, its lines marked by use and time rather than polish. The latter was cold beneath her hands as she climbed, her breath steady, her pulse a calm drum in her chest. A ground tech spotted her then, voice rising above the chaos, sharp with disbelief. "Stop. You can't. You're not cleared for that jet." Leah met his eyes for a breath, her voice low but certain. "You don't have another option." The words settled between them with a weight that left no room for argument. The tech hesitated, torn between rules that no longer mattered and the truth he could see in her face. Leah turned away, lowered herself into the seat, and pulled the harness across her chest. The cockpit smelled of oil, metal, the faint tang of old leather. The yoke was familiar beneath her hands, the cool surface warming as her grip tightened. She moved through the startup sequence with practiced ease, fingers flicking switches, feet finding the pedals, her world narrowing to the machine and the sky. The engine coughed once, then caught, a low growl rising to a roar that shook the tarmac. The vibrations ran up through the frame into her bones, steady and strong, the sound of a fighter waking from too long a sleep. Radio calls broke over the static, voices thick with shock and authority that no longer held weight. Unknown pilot in F-16. Stand down. Repeat. Stand down and power down your jet. Another voice layered over the first, closer to pleading than command. That is not your bird. Abort launch. That is a direct order. Leah stayed silent. The roar of the engine was answer enough. She checked the gauges, the horizon, the pattern of the black jets turning in the sky. Her breath moved even in her chest. The runway stretched ahead, heat bending the edges of her vision, but her focus was clear. She pushed the throttle forward, felt the power surge, the tires bite the concrete as the jet lunged ahead. The world narrowed to the sound of the wind and the rising pitch of the engine as the F-16 built speed. The nose lifted, the weight shifted, and then she was free of the ground. The base fell away beneath her, the buildings shrinking to toys, the people to shadows. The air was clean and endless, the sky wide open. The black jets saw her now. 5 shapes turned in unison, dark blades glinting as they caught the light, their attention drawn to the single jet that rose to meet them. They turned toward her, formation tightening, their speed building as they came. The radios had gone quiet, as if the base itself held its breath. Leah felt the machine respond beneath her, the shudder of air over the wings, the pull of gravity as she climbed. The yoke moved beneath her hands like a living thing, the vibrations speaking in a language she had never forgotten. The sun glared off the canopy, the world outside both bright and sharp, the black jets cutting toward her with terrible grace. On the ground, faces lifted, eyes tracking the lone jet that dared where the others had failed. The polished fighters that had been symbols of might now sat silent, watching as an old bird carried the hope of the base. Leah flew without thought of the watchers. This was not for them. This was the moment she had prepared for in silence, the moment she had always known would come. The black jets closed the distance, their lines clean, their speed relentless. They came as one, dark and sure, their edges sharp against the sunlit sky. Leah adjusted her course, found the angle, felt the balance between air and machine, between fear and resolve. The F-16 sang beneath her, engine and frame in harmony with her will. She leveled, then climbed, the sky opening before her, the black jets racing to meet her. The radios crackled again, a single voice breaking through the hush. Who is she, it asked, not to command, not to accuse, but in awe. No answer came. No answer was needed. Leah's hands were steady on the controls, her mind clear as the sky. The black jets were close now, close enough that she could see the sleek lines of their bodies, the cold intent in their formation. She did not flinch. She did not falter. She flew to meet them. The F-16, carrying her forward. The base below watching in silence as the battle began. The next move was hers, and the sky waited for her command. The sky felt endless and sharp as Leah rose into it, the F-16 pushing into the blue with a scream of defiance that carried across the desert floor. The black jets turned as one, 5 dark shapes against the brilliance of morning, their wings cutting clean through the sun's glare. They came for her, fast and sure, their formation tightening, boxing her in with precision that spoke of power honed without mercy. Their engines left no visible trail, only a shimmer of heat at their edges, as if the air itself recoiled from their passing. Leah kept her focus narrow and clear, her hands steady on the controls, her breathing slow and even as the G-forces pulled at her. The canopy vibrated with the rush of wind, the desert flashing below in streaks of sand and stone, the ridgelines and washes drawn in hard lines by the angle of the light. The stick rattled in her grip as the F-16 strained to match her will, the engine's roar a steady cry of effort and purpose. The black jets closed the distance, their silence more chilling than any threat shouted across the comms could have been. They split, 2 rising high to flank her from above, 2 diving low to cut her path, the 5th holding center as the hammer between. Leah felt the trap form in the space around her, the walls invisible but real. They expected her to react with panic, to break too soon, to give them the angle they needed. She gave them nothing. Instead, she let the pattern close, let their confidence harden into certainty, and then she acted. The F-16 dropped toward the desert floor in a dive so sharp that the airframe shuddered under the force, the terrain rising up fast and brutal. The G-forces clenched her tight, her vision narrowing at the edges. But her grip held true. Sand and rock whipped past beneath her wings as she skimmed the ground, every feature of the land etched into her mind from nights of study. The black jets followed, their speed a weapon that now worked against them, the angles of their dive too steep, their recovery too late. Leah swung the F-16 through a narrow cut between 2 ridges, the walls a blur at the edges of her vision, the space so tight that the wingtips seemed to draw lines in the dust. The The scream of the engine rose higher, the stick bucking as the airflow shifted, but she held her course, her body one with the machine. Above, the two black jets that had tried to trap her from the top lost sight of their target for a breath too long, their formation breaking as they climbed to avoid collision. The two below swung wide, forced out of position by the terrain, their speed now a burden rather than an advantage. The fifth jet held back, waiting for the moment to strike, but the moment never came. Leah turned into the gap, rolled the F-16 onto its side, and lifted over the ridge in a climb so sudden that the black jets below could not match it. The air thinned around her, the sky deepening to a darker shade, the sun's glare broken by the edge of her canopy. The comms crackled with the voice of a controller, awe breaking through the static. "She's inside their turn. Did you see that?" Another voice, breathless, answered, "She's outflying them. She's outflying them all." Leah heard the words but let them pass without weight. The black jets came again, their formation broken now, their unity fractured. They tried to regroup, to reform the net, but she stayed ahead of them, reading their moves as if they had been written for her. She cut back toward the ground, the desert rushing up once more, and used the heat of the land to mask her path, the shimmer of air bending their sensors, their sight. The F-16 moved as if it had been made for this dance, the stick and pedals extensions of her will, the engine's roar her own voice raised in answer to the challenge. The black jets pressed in, desperate now, their speed and stealth failing where instinct and knowledge ruled. Leah pulled into a high alpha turn that bled speed but bought her angle, the F-16 rising nearly on its tail before she dropped the nose and drove forward again, past the arc of a black jet's failed lock. The sky filled with their shapes, no longer graceful, no longer sure. The advantage that had been theirs at the start was gone, eroded by the truth of the moment. Leah saw the break in their pattern, the hesitation where certainty had lived. She drove through it, clean and sharp, her path opening as the black jets turned away. No longer the hunters, but the hunted. From the tower, silence reigned, broken only by the steady hum of equipment and the breath that no one dared release. The watchers saw what unfolded and knew they witnessed mastery beyond tech, beyond plan. Leah flew because she knew the sky, knew the machine, knew herself, and the black jets, for all their might, could not match it. One by one, they broke off, their speed carrying them clear, their formation shattered beyond repair. They climbed and turned, vanishing into the glare where the sun met the horizon, leaving Leah alone in the clear. The F-16 leveled, its engine's song softening to a steady hum of endurance, its pilot calm, steady, her heart as quiet as her hands on the controls. The desert lay wide and silent below, the base watching, the sky left to Leah, free, and hers by right, earned in skill and courage. The threat was gone, and she remained, the master of the moment, the proof of what preparation could become when called upon. The radios stayed quiet, the words unneeded, the lesson plain in the clear blue that spread unbroken around her. The battle had ended, and Leah had won. The F-16 touched down with a grace that made the watchers on the ground hold their breath. The tires met the tarmac in a smooth line, the weight of the jet settling as if it had always been meant to return just so. The engine's roar faded to a steady hum. Then, to a low growl, as Leah guided the aircraft along the runway's length. The base was silent now, the voices that had filled the morning lost in the stillness that followed the storm. The polished fighters that had once been the pride of the flight line stood as they had before, but something about them seemed smaller now, as if they knew they had been outshone. The F-16 rolled to a stop at the edge of the line, where it had begun. Leah's hands moved with the same quiet precision that had guided them in the air. She powered down the systems, each switch flipped with care, the hum of the jet softening to nothing but the hiss of cooling metal. The canopy lifted, letting in the rising breeze that carried the smell of hot metal, fuel, and the faint sweetness of desert sage stirred by the wind. Leah sat for a moment longer, the helmet resting heavy in her hands, the weight of it familiar, grounding. Below, the crews gathered, their faces turned up toward her. There were no cheers, no words shouted in triumph. Instead, there was a silence deeper than any applause, filled with a respect that had not been there before. Leah rose, stepping onto the ladder, boots meeting metal with a sound that echoed faintly in the quiet. She climbed down, each motion steady, unhurried. When her feet touched the ground, she stood straight, the helmet cradled in the crook of her arm, the flight gloves tucked beside it, the fabric soft with wear. The breeze lifted again, tugging at the edges of her flight suit, cooling the sweat at her temples. The tarmac stretched wide around her, the heat of the day still trapped in the concrete beneath her boots. The base watched, those who had doubted, those who had mocked. Now, silent, their gazes following her as she began to walk. The air seemed to hum with what had passed, the sky above vast and empty, the threat gone. Peace returned. A figure stepped forward from the edge of the gathering, a senior commander, his face lined from years of duty, his eyes clear now with understanding. He came to a stop a few paces from Leah, removed his cap, and nodded once. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of all that needed to be said. No words were offered. None were needed. The nod was acknowledgment, apology, and respect given where it had been earned. Somewhere behind them, a young pilot's voice broke the quiet, low enough that it carried only to those nearest. Who was she? The question hung in the air for a moment. Then another voice, softer, answered. The one who saved us. Leah did not slow, did not turn at the words. She continued across the tarmac, the breeze rising, lifting dust along the edges of the runway, the world settling back into stillness. The crowd parted without needing to be asked, a space opening before her. Not from fear, but from respect. She passed through, eyes forward, expression calm, unchanged from the woman who had walked that same path hours before, unseen by those who now watched her with new eyes. The hangar stood ahead, its shadow long in the afternoon light. Leah reached it, the coolness of the space wrapping around her as she stepped inside. The noise of the base fell away, muffled by the walls, the weight of the moment settling into the quiet. She set the helmet down on a bench, fingers resting on it for a breath longer than needed. Then let it go. The gloves followed, placed with care, the gesture final, a mark of work done well. Outside, the base remained where she had left it, the people and the machines, the sky above them all wide and clear. The battle had ended, and Leah had brought them through, not with speeches or banners, but with the skill and courage she had honed in silence. The victory needed no applause, no parade. It spoke for itself in the peace that now stretched from horizon to horizon, in the knowledge that, when the moment had come, she had answered. Leah moved deeper into the hangar, the shadows gathering around her, the scent of oil and old metal filling the space. The quiet welcomed her back, the place where she had always belonged, where preparation had shaped the hand that had guided the F-16 through the sky. Outside, the breeze carried away the last heat of the day, the sun beginning its slow descent, the base returning to its rhythm, changed in ways that could not be spoken, only known. The F-16 stood at the edge of the flight line, its form simple, unadorned, but now seen with new eyes. The machine had been ready, waiting for the right hands. Leah had been those hands. The sky above it was empty now, the threat gone, the day saved. The base had been given back its peace, and it knew who had given it. Leah paused at the far side of the hangar, looking out across the field one last time before the night came. The breeze lifted her hair from her neck, carried the scent of the desert to her. She breathed it in, let it out, and turned away, leaving the day behind, her work complete. The tarmac lay quiet. The base watched the horizon, and the sky stretched wide and free, as it should. The victory belonged to Leah, not because it had been claimed, but because it had been earned, and that was enough. In the end, Leah showed what true strength looks like. She proved that courage does not always need applause and that mastery often waits in the quiet, unseen by those too busy to notice. Against overwhelming odds, she stepped forward when no one else could. Not for praise, but because she had prepared for this moment all along. Her journey reminds us that self-worth comes not from the approval of others, but from knowing who you are and what you can do. It speaks to the power of independence, of standing steady when the world looks past you. Let Leah's story inspire you to reflect on your own hidden strengths. If her quiet courage moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and follow for more stories that honor the strength found in the silence between moments.